I worked for Keanu Reeves' personal doctor, and his blood wasn't human anymore. It sounds insane, but it's the terrifying truth. What started as a dream job quickly turned into a nightmare I couldn't escape. Keanu, the untouchable legend, wasn't who we thought he was. What I saw behind closed doors was a horrifying transformation that went beyond fame. This isn't just about celebrity secrets. It's about a dark side of fame that no one talks about. I'll be honest, I took the job because it seemed too good to pass up. Working for Keanu Reeves' personal doctor? That's the kind of opportunity most people only dream of. I was fresh out of college, desperate for a career boost, and the thought of being involved in the world of A-list celebrities felt like winning the lottery. The office was pristine, marble floors, elegant lighting, and a calm, almost eerie silence that seemed to hang in the air. It was everything I'd imagined a high-end celebrity treatment center would be, and then some. The first day was surreal. I mean, just walking through those doors felt like stepping into another world. The doctor, though, was the first thing that felt off. His demeanor was far too calm, too controlled. There was an air of detachment about him, like he didn't quite belong in the world he inhabited. Everything about him screamed mysterious genius, but not in a good way. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first, but it gnawed at me. And Keanu? The man himself. Honestly, it felt like the world's most famous recluse had just walked out of one of his movies. But there was something strange about him. A quiet, almost haunting presence. He didn't seem the same as the jovial, down-to-earth star everyone adored. His eyes, they were different. Like he wasn't really there. Or maybe he was somewhere deep inside his mind, locked away. It was as if the weight of his fame had already started to eat away at him. I thought I was starstruck at first, the allure of it all. The proximity to someone as legendary as Keanu. The chance to glimpse behind the curtain of the fame machine. But as I spent more time there, the illusion started to crack. I began to see the tiny cracks in the facade. The doctor would always talk about regenerating Keanu, preserving his vitality. But what did that mean exactly? It wasn't like a typical medical treatment I'd seen. These weren't just checkups or wellness rituals. They were something deeper, something darker. I just didn't know what it was yet. Keanu seemed to go along with it all, like he had no choice. He didn't fight it, and I could tell. It was wearing on him. I saw him flinch sometimes during procedures, but he would quickly mask it with that perfect smile he was famous for. A smile that didn't reach his eyes. His body didn't seem to belong to him anymore, like it was under the control of something far bigger than the man who had once charmed the world. But again, I pushed it aside. After all, who was I to question how the rich and famous took care of themselves? Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Not just about the treatments, but about everything. The office was too quiet, too sterile, and Keanu, his presence, his mannerisms, it all felt off. The more time I spent there, the more I couldn't ignore it. Something was happening to him, something that couldn't be fixed by a pill or a treatment. This wasn't about staying young. This was about surviving something far worse. I didn't know it then, but the deeper I dug, the more I'd realize I wasn't just working for a doctor. I was involved in something that would change everything I thought I knew about fame, immortality, and what it costs. I started working at the clinic thinking it would be like any other job. Routine, a bit of glamour, and maybe some unexpected perks. but I quickly learned that this was anything but ordinary. As the weeks went by, I fell into a rhythm. Each day, Keanu came in for his treatments, and every time there was a sense of anticipation in the air. The kind of tension you'd expect in a room where the fate of a superstar's career, or even life, is hanging in the balance. At first, I didn't think much of it. I was still starstruck, caught up in the excitement of being around one of the world's biggest names. The treatment seemed straightforward enough. Regular checkups, occasional IVs, massages, some strange concoctions of vitamins and minerals that were apparently customized for him. But soon, I began to notice something off. The doctor, though always professional, started referring to Keanu's regeneration as if it were a scientific miracle, like it was beyond human reach. It didn't just sound like medical jargon anymore. It was more like religious fervor. He spoke with this cold certainty, as if he knew Keanu's immortality was the key to something much bigger than just one man. I began paying closer attention. Keanu was undergoing treatments I'd never seen before. They weren't for the faint of heart. At first, they just seemed like high-end wellness procedures. Blood tests, injections, intravenous fluids, but the intensity kept increasing. There were nights when I stayed late, filing papers or checking emails, and I'd overhear pieces of conversations between the doctor and his assistants. Words like preservation, eternal youth, and even life extension would float by. It wasn't long before I realized that these weren't just treatments for Keanu's health. These were experiments. The doctor wasn't just trying to make Keanu feel better. He was trying to change him. The more I witnessed, the more I felt like I was on the edge of a cliff, peering into a world I wasn't meant to see. The doctor would administer strange cocktails of medications that, to my knowledge, hadn't been approved by any governing body. There were tests that were too invasive for an ordinary wellness plan, things that looked more like genetic manipulation than anything else. Keanu's body seemed to be a lab experiment, and the doctor was his willing creator. I remember one evening in particular. I was alone in the office, cleaning up after a late treatment session when I found a syringe left on a counter, the label scratched off. My stomach turned when I saw the dark red liquid inside. It wasn't blood, but it wasn't anything else I recognized either. I didn't have the nerve to touch it, but I couldn't look away. Something about it was wrong. The fact that it had been left there for me to find made it feel even more deliberate, like the doctor was testing me, seeing how far I was willing to go. I felt a pit in my stomach as I realized the scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about keeping Keanu youthful. This was something far darker. He was being kept alive, but not by ordinary means. Something was inside him, changing him. I couldn't figure out what it was yet, but I knew whatever it wasn't natural. The blood tests, the treatments, they weren't just for health. They were for something far more sinister. Keanu's behavior was also starting to shift. It wasn't just the treatments that were affecting him. It was as if his very essence was slipping away. The man who had once radiated warmth, humility, and genuine kindness seemed increasingly distant. I saw him more than once staring blankly into space, as if trapped inside his own body. Other times, he was twitchy, agitated, like the weight of his own existence was too much to bear. He wasn't the man I had idolized. He wasn't the man the world knew. One day, after another long session, I overheard the doctor say something that made my blood run cold. "He's not human anymore," the doctor said, as if it were the simplest statement in the world. His body's been completely altered. And soon, the world will see what he's become. I froze. I wanted to rush in and demand an explanation, but the words stuck in my throat. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Keanu wasn't human anymore? What was that supposed to mean? How was that even possible? That was when I realized this wasn't just about preserving Keanu's youth or stardom. It was about something else entirely. The doctor wasn't just keeping Keanu alive. He was trying to make him something immortal, something beyond human. And what terrified me the most was the possibility that Keanu, the person who had once seemed so untouchable, might have agreed to this. Maybe he had, in his desperation to escape time, to escape death. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Keanu, the man I once admired, was slipping away. His soul, if that's even what you could call it, was being stripped from him piece by piece. I couldn't stop wondering what the doctor's true motives were. It was clear that this wasn't just medical science. There was something almost religious about it. The doctor wasn't healing Keanu. He was changing him into something else, and that's when it hit me. I wasn't just witnessing something extraordinary. I was witnessing a monstrous transformation, a transformation that was about to break the laws of nature itself. But this was only the beginning. What I was about to discover would make everything I'd seen so far seem like a mere warm-up to the horror that lay ahead. I didn't want to believe it at first. The idea that Keanu wasn't just maintaining his youth, but actively fighting against the one thing none of us can escape, death, seemed insane. But the more I saw, the more undeniable it became. I began to dig deeper into the treatments, and what I uncovered made my skin crawl. Keanu's body was no longer simply being preserved. He was undergoing a kind of unnatural regeneration. It was like he was being reprogrammed from the inside out, as if the clock on his life had been rewound and was now being held in place by something far more sinister than medicine. The doctor didn't just have access to the best treatments. He had access to things no one should have. Genetic engineering, experimental procedures, things I didn't even have the words to describe. The word immortality was thrown around casually, like it was just a part of the treatment plan. But immortality didn't just mean looking young forever. It meant something else entirely. Something deeper, more disturbing. The treatments were no longer just about maintaining health. They were about altering Keanu at a cellular level, rewriting his genetic code. There were injections, mysterious compounds that the doctor called life-extending agents. I had never heard of such things, but the more I asked, the less I understood. Each compound seemed to be an attempt to slow the inevitable, to stop time itself from wearing Keanu down. The doctor was obsessed with the idea that aging was not a natural process, but an error, something to be corrected. One evening, I stayed late to finish some filing when I overheard a conversation between the doctor and one of his assistants. They were talking about Keanu's condition and how it was progressing. I didn't hear much at first, but the words phase 1 and stabilization stuck with me. They were talking about phases. Phases of what? I was about to find out, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. That's when I discovered the files. Hidden in the back of one of the cabinets, in a folder labeled Project 1125, were a series of reports detailing Keanu's transformation. What I found made my stomach twist. The reports didn't just talk about normal treatments. They mentioned things like cellular adaptation, genetic modification, and even human enhancement. These weren't just treatments to help Keanu look young. They were experiments to keep him alive at any cost. I was shaken to the core as I read. The doctor's methods were barbaric. The treatments weren't about preserving health or beauty. They were about preventing death, preventing the natural decay of the human body. Keanu wasn't just undergoing a rejuvenation treatment. He was becoming something else, something beyond human. He was no longer the man I'd admired from afar. He was a product of something monstrous. As I read through the reports, a horrifying realization hit me. Keanu wasn't the only one. The doctor wasn't just working on one celebrity. He was building an empire. There were other names listed in the reports. Celebrities, politicians, power players, all undergoing similar treatments. Keanu was just the first. The doctor wasn't just trying to preserve a few famous faces. He was creating a whole new class of people who could live forever. Immortality wasn't for the few. It was a product, and he was selling it to the highest bidder. I couldn't stop myself from reading further. The more I read, the more I realized that this wasn't just a series of medical experiments, it was a business. And the business was immortality. The doctor was not a healer, but a creator, playing God with the lives of the rich and famous. He wasn't just treating his patients. He was transforming them into something beyond human, something that would never age, never die. The cost? Everything. Their souls, their humanity, and Keanu was no exception. I found another file, buried deep under layers of paperwork, that detailed the consequences of these treatments. The immortality process, as the doctor called it, was not without side effects. At first, it seemed like the subjects were thriving, but over time, they began to change in ways the doctor hadn't predicted. The file mentioned symptoms like personality shifts, memory lapses, and emotional detachment. The more the subjects underwent the treatments, the more they became unrecognizable, not just physically, but mentally. It was as though their very essence was being erased, their identities replaced by something else, something cold, something inhuman. I couldn't believe it. Keanu was losing himself. The man I had admired, the man who had brought warmth to so many through his films, was slipping away. The treatments were working too well, but in the process, they were stealing his soul. And the worst part? He didn't even seem to notice. He was being consumed by the very thing that had made him immortal. Fame, youth, beauty, they were all traps. And now, they had him trapped in a cycle of eternal existence where he would never escape. I had always admired Keanu. I thought his down-to-earth nature was what made him stand out among other celebrities. But what I had discovered wasn't the result of fame. It was the consequence of desperation. He wasn't just trying to preserve his life. He was trying to cheat it. And in doing so, he had lost everything that made him human. That's when the panic set in. The doctor wasn't just experimenting with Keanu. He was experimenting with everyone. This wasn't about one man. It was about creating an army of immortal beings who would live forever, untouched by time, unaffected by age. The cost of immortality? It wasn't just physical. It was psychological. It was spiritual. And it was destroying everything that made these people real. What I had discovered was beyond horrifying. Keanu was no longer just a celebrity. It was clear now. He was a victim. And if I didn't act quickly, I'd be next. It started with a late-night shift. the kind where the office was quiet and the world felt distant. I had been going through some files trying to finish up the backlog of paperwork when I heard movement from the treatment room. The light was still on, and I knew Keanu was in there. It wasn't unusual. Sometimes he'd stay late for additional procedures. But this time, something felt different, darker. There was an urgency to it, like the doctor was racing against something he couldn't control. I told myself I shouldn't go in. It wasn't my place to observe the treatments, especially not after everything I had already uncovered. But curiosity got the better of me. I slipped quietly into the hallway, moving toward the treatment room where Keanu was. What I saw when I entered that room made me freeze in my tracks. Keanu was lying on the table, his eyes closed, his face pale under the harsh white lights. The doctor and his assistant were standing over him, busy with what looked like a complex procedure. The sight alone wasn't what shocked me. It was what they were doing. The assistant was drawing blood, but not in the way you'd expect. This wasn't just a routine blood draw. No, this was something far more sinister. The needle wasn't going into his arm like a normal blood draw would. It was hooked into a vein in his neck, and the blood was being extracted in large quantities. But it wasn't the color I was used to. It wasn't the familiar deep red of human blood. This blood was glowing. A soft, sickly yellow light pulsed within it, almost like something was alive inside the veins. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. All I could do was watch as the doctor filled syringe after syringe with this strange, luminous liquid. I didn't understand what I was seeing, but deep down, I knew it wasn't right. This was not the blood of a human being. This was something else entirely. "Is it ready?" the assistant asked, his voice a little too calm for what was happening. The doctor nodded, his face calm, almost indifferent. "It's working," he said, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. "The regeneration process is stabilizing. We've got what we need." What they needed? What was this? I couldn't comprehend what I was hearing, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever this was, it was no longer about health. It was about something far darker. Keanu's blood wasn't just altered, it was a tool. A key to something beyond life and death. As the doctor and assistant finished extracting the blood, the reality of what I was witnessing hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just a medical procedure. This was a transformation. Keanu wasn't just aging backward or staying young. His body was changing into something else, something inhuman. And the doctor? He wasn't just trying to preserve Keanu's life. He was engineering a new kind of existence, something that defied every natural law. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I watched them move the glowing blood into another container, one that looked like some kind of storage unit, sealed tightly, as if it were some rare, precious commodity. I should have run. I should have left that room immediately, but instead, I stood frozen, unable to tear my eyes away. My hands were shaking, and I could feel my breath coming faster, panicking, but I couldn't look away from the sight in front of me. What the hell was happening? The doctor looked over at the assistant and said, "It's time to integrate the serum." That word, serum, echoed in my mind. What was that supposed to mean? I couldn't wrap my mind around the implications. This wasn't just about keeping Keanu alive. This was about turning him into something else. Something beyond human, something eternal. The doctor and the assistant then turned their attention to Keanu, preparing a new injection filled with the glowing serum. I could see the syringe held between the doctor's fingers, the liquid swirling inside. I had never seen anything like it. The serum had a golden hue to it, almost too bright, like it was alive. It didn't seem like anything that should exist in the human body. As the needle was slowly inserted into Keanu's neck, I felt my stomach turn. The syringe emptied, the serum slowly entering Keanu's veins, and that's when I saw it. His body reacting, jerking slightly as if it was fighting the foreign substance. For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of pain flash across Keanu's face before he returned to his lifeless state. I didn't know what to think. This wasn't the Keanu I had come to know. This wasn't the man the world adored. This wasn't just a celebrity going through some secret treatments. This was a human being being turned into something else, something monstrous. I turned to leave, my mind reeling, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I felt like I was trapped in the room, my feet glued to the floor. I couldn't take it. I had to know more. I needed answers. What was this doctor doing to him? What was he making Keanu into? The sound of the door clicking open behind me made my heart stop. I hadn't heard anyone coming in. But there, standing in the doorway, was the doctor, his cold eyes locking onto mine. "You shouldn't have seen that," he said calmly, his voice chilling in its indifference. "But now that you have, you understand what's at stake here." The doctor didn't seem worried, but I was. What I had just witnessed was only the tip of the iceberg. The transformation wasn't just about Keanu anymore. I was about to learn that nothing was what it seemed. I thought I had seen the worst. I thought witnessing Keanu's transformation, the glowing blood, the serum, it was the peak of the nightmare. But I was wrong. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that this was just the beginning. I had stepped into a world I couldn't escape from. And now, the truth was in front of me, staring me down with cold, emotionless eyes. The doctor had caught me in that room, and the way he looked at me, it was like he wasn't even angry, just resigned, as if he knew that eventually someone would discover the truth. But I hadn't been prepared for what came next. I had been expecting an explanation, maybe even an apology. But instead, the doctor simply nodded as if I'd passed some kind of test. "You've seen what we're doing here," he said calmly, as if it was all routine. "And now, you understand why it's necessary." I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but something inside me shut down. I wasn't just part of this anymore. I was involved. Whether I liked it or not, I had already seen too much. The doctor wasn't going to let me walk away. Not now, not after everything. "Keanu," I started, my voice shaky. "He's not human anymore. What are you doing to him?" The doctor didn't flinch. He didn't even seem surprised by my question. He just looked at me with that cold, calculating gaze and said, "Keanu is transcending what you and I call human. The process is working. It's evolving him into something far beyond your comprehension. And soon, the world will see it. He won't just be a man. He'll be eternal." The weight of those words hit me harder than I expected. Eternal. I had thought immortality was just a myth, a fantasy that only the desperate dreamed about. But the doctor wasn't dreaming. He was doing it. He was playing God with people's lives, taking them to the edge of existence and beyond. Keanu wasn't just his first patient. He was his masterpiece. "And you," I couldn't help myself. You think this is right? Turning people into this? My voice cracked, anger and fear rising up in my chest. How can you do this to them? How can you do this to him? The doctor didn't answer right away. He just turned and walked over to his desk, picking up a vial filled with the glowing serum that had been injected into Keanu. He held it up, studying the liquid inside like it was the most precious thing in the world. Fame, the doctor said, his voice suddenly quieter, is a prison. You think these people have it all? But they're slaves to time, to the inevitable. They fight it desperately because they know that everything they've built, everything they are, is fleeting. It doesn't last. And in the end, they're just like everyone else. Forgotten. He paused, letting the words sink in. But I'm offering them something more. Something that lasts. A chance to never fade. To never be forgotten. I was speechless. The truth of what he was saying hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Fame, immortality. It wasn't just a dream for Keanu and others like him. It was a curse. The doctor wasn't lying when he said they were slaves to time. Fame wasn't the answer to all their problems. It was the cause of their torment. They were trapped in this cycle of endless striving, trying to hold on to something that was always slipping away. But at what cost? I whispered, the words barely escaping my throat. Keanu, he's losing himself. He's not the man he used to be. This isn't living. This is torture. The doctor turned to face me then, his expression unreadable. You don't understand. You can't. You've only seen a glimpse of what's possible. But soon, you'll see it all. And you'll understand that what we're doing isn't just for the rich and famous. It's for everyone. This isn't about Keanu. This is about changing the world. His words were chilling, but what scared me even more was how calm he was. There was no remorse, no regret in his voice. He wasn't a mad scientist. He wasn't a villain out of a bad movie. He was a man who believed, without a doubt, that what he was doing was right. That Keanu's transformation wasn't just a necessity. It was a gift. A gift that came at the cost of everything that made a person human. A gift that took away everything Keanu had ever been. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run and expose everything to the world. But I knew that wouldn't work. The doctor was too powerful. The people who had undergone his treatments were too powerful. Keanu was already beyond my reach. And me. I was already part of this dark world, whether I liked it or not. The doctor stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as if he could read every thought running through my mind. You're in this now. There's no going back. You've seen too much. And if you try to leave, well, things will get complicated. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. And somehow that made it worse. I couldn't move. I couldn't even think. My mind was reeling, my thoughts spiraling. I had walked into this job expecting a glamorous backstage pass to a celebrity's life. What I had found was a nightmare. Keanu wasn't the person I thought he was, and the doctor wasn't the healer I had imagined. They were part of a twisted, horrifying experiment, and I was the unwilling witness. But even worse, I was now a part of it. I looked at the doctor, my voice barely a whisper. What do you want from me? He gave me a cold smile, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something dark behind his eyes. I want you to understand, he said. I want you to see the truth. And when you do, You'll never be able to unsee it. I had seen enough to know that there was no turning back. But the most horrifying thing? The doctor was only getting started, and what he had planned next would change everything. I couldn't breathe. The weight of what the doctor had said hung in the air like a dense fog. I was trapped in a world I didn't understand, a world that was spinning further and further out of control. I had been working for him, watching Keanu's transformation unfold before my eyes, but now I was a part of it. I wasn't just an observer anymore. I was complicit. The doctor's words echoed in my mind. You're in this now. There's no going back. It was true. There was no escape. Every day I stayed, I became more entangled in the web of lies, secrets, and twisted experiments. I had watched as Keanu's humanity drained away, piece by piece. But that wasn't all. I had seen the doctor perform similar treatments on others. Powerful people, celebrities, moguls. He was building an army of immortals. This wasn't just for Keanu. It was a blueprint for something bigger, something much darker. But I couldn't stay silent anymore. I couldn't live with the guilt of knowing what was happening and doing nothing about it. The fear that had once paralyzed me, that had made me want to turn away, had now transformed into something else. Rage. The doctor was playing God, and it was time someone stood up to him. It was time to expose the truth. I knew it wouldn't be easy. The doctor had too much power, and I was just one person against a system that was already far too entrenched. But something in me had shifted. I couldn't let Keanu's sacrifice be in vain. I couldn't let this madness continue unchecked. That night, I made up my mind. I would confront the doctor. I had to. I waited until, after hours, the clinic empty, the silence deafening. I knew the doctor would be in his office, going over the latest reports, possibly making plans for his next subject. The thought of all the people he was manipulating, all the lives he was controlling, made my blood boil. But this time, I wasn't going to be passive. This time, I was going to fight. I stepped into his office without knocking, my heart pounding in my chest. The doctor looked up from his desk, his eyes narrowing when he saw me. His face remained stoic, as always, but there was something in his gaze now, something darker, something that made me feel like a small insect under a magnifying glass. I knew you'd come, he said, his voice as calm as ever. You've seen too much to walk away now. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. What the hell are you doing to these people? I demanded, my voice trembling with fury. Keanu isn't the only one, is he? You're turning them into something not human. You're playing with their lives like they're experiments. The doctor didn't flinch. He didn't even seem surprised by my outburst. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, his hands folded in front of him. I'm not playing with their lives, he said coolly. I'm giving them what they've always wanted, what they've always needed. Immortality. Immortality? I repeated, incredulous. At the cost of everything that makes them human? You're stripping them of their souls. He chuckled softly, a sound that sent a chill down my spine. You don't understand. This isn't about keeping them alive forever. This is about giving them the chance to transcend, to evolve beyond the frailty of the human condition. They're no longer bound by time. They're free. I shook my head, my hands trembling. They're not free. They're trapped. You've turned them into monsters. And now, you're trying to do the same to me. The doctor's expression didn't change. You think you have a choice in the matter? You're already involved, whether you like it or not. You've seen too much. You know too much. If you try to expose me, it will ruin you. Your life will be destroyed. I felt a surge of fear, but I pushed it down. The stakes were too high now. I had to keep going. You don't get it? This isn't just about you and me. You're ruining lives. You're playing with people's futures. You're stealing their humanity for the sake of your experiment. The doctor stood up slowly, walking around his desk to stand in front of me. His eyes were colder now, his face a mask of calculation. Do you think I don't know what I'm doing? Do you think I'm blind to the cost? Of course, there's a price, but if you could see what I see, if you could understand the potential, the power, the possibility of what I'm creating, you would understand that the price is worth it. I took a step back, my chest tight with fear and anger. The price isn't worth it. Keanu's already lost himself. And everyone else you're doing this to, they're not human anymore. They're just shells. The doctor's eyes darkened. And what will you do about it? You think you can expose me? You think the world is ready for the truth? You can't stop what's already in motion. In that moment, I realized he was right. I couldn't stop him. Not on my own. The system he had built was too powerful. The people involved were too deep. But I knew I couldn't let him win. I couldn't let this continue without at least trying to destroy it. I'll expose you, I said, my voice steady now. I'll make sure the world knows what you're doing. It's not over. The doctor smiled, a cold, predatory smile. You think you can fight this? You think you can take down something this big? You'll learn the hard way. You're too small, too insignificant. He turned to walk back to his desk, but before he could sit, he turned to face me one last time. You're a part of this now, and once you're in, there's no getting out. You've already seen what I'm capable of. Don't make me prove it again. As he turned his back to me, I realized something terrible. I wasn't just fighting the doctor. I was fighting a system, a machine that couldn't be stopped. But I had to try, because if I didn't, everything I knew would be consumed by this nightmare. I left the doctor's office that night, my heart pounding, my mind racing. I had made the decision to expose everything. I knew what the risks were, but they no longer mattered. I couldn't live with the knowledge of what was happening in that clinic. The world needed to know the truth about Keanu, the doctor, and the horrors behind the so-called immortality they were selling. I made a plan. I would contact the media, leak the files, gather evidence, everything I could to bring this dark secret into the light. I couldn't do it alone, but I knew there were people who could help. The world needed to see what these so-called immortality treatments were really doing to the people who trusted this doctor. But nothing went as planned. The next morning, I woke to an empty apartment and a missed call from an unknown number. I ignored it at first, but then I saw it on the news. A story about a sudden, tragic accident involving one of the doctor's former patients. The headlines were full of praise for the doctor's work. They painted him as a hero, a visionary, someone who had revolutionized modern medicine. Not a word about the truth. I knew right away what had happened. The doctor had seen me coming. He had silenced me before I could even begin. It was a warning, a message. If I thought I could expose him, I was sorely mistaken. I tried to go to the authorities, but when I reached out, I found that the people I thought I could trust had already been bought off. The doctor's influence ran too deep. He wasn't just operating in a small corner of the world. He had connections in high places, people who would make sure his work stayed secret. The more I dug, the more I realized how far-reaching the doctor's operation was. The power he wielded was insurmountable. He had been creating an elite group of immortal beings, those who could never be touched, never age, never die. Keanu wasn't the only one. There were more out there, hidden in the shadows, their immortality protected by this twisted system. I couldn't stop it. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how much evidence I collected, there was always someone watching, someone pulling the strings. The media would never report it, and the authorities were already on his side. The truth was buried deeper than I could ever reach. It was then that I realized the most chilling truth of all. I was now part of the system. I was complicit in his work, even if I hadn't meant to be. I had seen too much, and I had made the mistake of thinking I could fight back. But now, I was a target too. I couldn't run. I couldn't hide. I had no one left to turn to. The doctor had won. He had taken everything from me. The truth, my freedom, my life. He had created a system that would never allow me to escape. The worst part? I knew I wasn't alone. There were others out there, people who had been transformed, their humanity ripped away. And like me, they were all trapped in this nightmare. But I couldn't stop. The fight wasn't over. I would never be free of what I had seen. And maybe, just maybe, there were others out there who would one day rise up and expose the truth. Final payoff. Keanu wasn't a star anymore. He was a prisoner, locked in a body that no longer belonged to him. The doctor's so-called immortality was a curse, a slow death disguised as eternal life. And me, I was just as trapped. The truth had been buried, silenced by those in power. I couldn't expose it. No one would believe me. The doctor's empire was untouchable. And now, I was part of it, complicit in the madness. Fame wasn't the dream I thought it was. It was a nightmare. And I had been swallowed whole.